The Allen Lund Company thanks all the hard-working drivers who are moving goods across the country. We can't do it without you.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
Diesel prices have been pretty steady over the past few weeks, but what do the next few weeks or even months have in store? That depends, according to Tom Kloza of the Oil Price Information Service. He'll break down the list of scenarios for us and what they could mean for you when filling up. An OOIDA Life member and former board member was named Overdrive's Trucker of the Year. We speak with him about the award and how life behind the wheel quickly turned from a job into a passion. And finally, the recent cold snap that thumped the U.S. has ripple effects on the spot market. Robert Rouse of DAT joins the program for a look at the landscape and one market that's got a strong demand for trucks right now. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration says it remains committed to addressing the lack of broker transparency in the trucking industry, and a rulemaking to do just that is still on track to be released in 2024. The clarification from FMCSA follows the recent release of the U.S. Department of Transportation's significant rulemaking report, which did not include an entry for broker transparency. The agency's communications director telling Landline that FMCSA does remain committed to initiating a rulemaking in 2024 concerning broker transparency. The DOT's significant rulemaking report is not a rundown of every regulatory action planned by its agencies, only those that are defined as being economically significant, ones that would have an annual effect on the economy of $100 million or more. The agency said it doesn't believe the broker rulemaking meets that definition, which is why it was not included in the report. However, FMCSA's previous projections that a notice of proposed rulemaking would be published in October 2024 appear to be on track. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association petitioned FMCSA in 2020 to begin the rulemaking process for more transparency in trucking transactions with brokers. Last spring, FMCSA granted the association's petition, as well as a petition from the Small Business and Transportation Coalition to start that rulemaking process. Jay Grimes, OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, said the association is anxiously awaiting the transparency proposal, since broker concerns remain a top issue for OOIDA members. Grimes added, the sooner, the better. If electric trucks are ever going to take hold in a meaningful way, it'll take a big investment in a national charging infrastructure, and that's the mission of a new coalition. It's called Powering America's Commercial Transportation, or PACT. Daimler Truck North America, Navistar, and Volvo Group North America are behind it. The companies say PACT will use education and advocacy to speed up the construction of national electric truck charging infrastructure. That includes lobbying on the state and federal levels. The truck manufacturers do carry some weight. Together, they account for about 70% of all new medium and heavy-duty truck sales in the U.S., and while each company has battery electric vehicles on the market, making sure they stay charged on roadways is a challenge because simply there isn't enough infrastructure out there, and the grid is not capable of meeting that demand. It's a heavy lift for sure. The American Transportation Research Institute has crunched the numbers and done the research. One report last year looked at the widespread challenges. Another late last year looked at just California as a test case. And Jeff Short, ATRI's vice president, told us there are far more questions than answers right now.
So with that report, we looked at the full United States, and we said, what would it take to change the fleet in the United States of cars, trucks, SUVs, pickup trucks, everything, to electric? And what are the major impediments facing us to move in that direction? So the first one is the amount of electricity. And we went and calculated how much electricity would be needed to move vehicles in the same manner they're moved today. And what we found was it would require an increase of 40% of the electricity produced. So today's electricity, vehicles would consume 40%. We would need massive utility infrastructure investment, more electricity to be produced in order to meet that goal. And then we also looked at how much of the materials that go into the batteries would be required. to replace the U.S. fleet. And that was a huge number. There was many years, in some cases decades, of global production would be required. And also, a lot of the known reserves would have to go to U.S. vehicles. And granted, there will be a number of other countries who will be seeking these materials. And then finally, from a specifically trucking perspective, we said, what's this going to take as far as truck parking? How are trucks going to refuel? And we found that there's a huge need for chargers. There would need to be a charger at every single truck parking spot in America, at the very least, more than 300,000 fast chargers to support the trucking industry. And that would cost a lot, require a lot to maintain that as well. So those were the national questions.
The very questions the new coalition pact hopes to answer. The International Council on Clean Transportation said nearly 700,000 chargers will be needed nationwide to accommodate the 1 million Class 4 through Class 8 medium and heavy-duty zero direct emission vehicles that are expected to be deployed by the year 2030. UPS is making cuts, the company announcing plans to lay off 12,000 workers this year, something the company says will save them more than $1 billion. UPS cited higher labor costs and softening demand as the reason for the cutbacks. Company leaders also hinted they may put its Coyote truckload brokerage business up for sale. The announcement coming just months after UPS and the Teamsters agreed on terms to a new contract agreement that includes significant raises for full and part-time union workers. 4 current and former Massachusetts state troopers have been arrested and charged for their alleged role in a CDL bribery scheme. The acting U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts announced a 74-count indictment against a total of 6 defendants. The alleged scheme dates back years. Prosecutors say the defendants worked together to give at least 17 CDL applicants passing scores, whether they actually pass their skills test or not. In exchange, they received bribes in the form of bottled water, coffee, and tea products, among other favors like a new driveway, new snowblower, and a granite post and mailbox. The price of taking the New Jersey Turnpike and Garden State Parkway is going up again. The New Jersey Turnpike Authority has approved a 3% toll hike set to go into effect on March 1st. Governor Phil Murphy vetoed this exact same plan last fall, but he said he'll let this one go through. The Nevada DOT has an alert out for truck drivers due to the closure of an escape ramp on eastbound US 50 in Carson City. The ramp was shut down this week for maintenance, and it'll stay that way through early March. Another truck escape ramp nearby, located near the US 50 US 395 junction, remains open. And finally, is an 87-year-old mystery about to be solved? A former U.S. Air Force intelligence officer is hopeful. Tony Romeo believes he may have found the wreckage of Amelia Earhart's plane at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Using sonar data from a deep-sea drone, Romeo spotted an anomaly on the ocean floor, about 100 miles from Howland Island, roughly halfway between Hawaii and Australia. The images show something that appears to be shaped like a plane, roughly the size of the Lockheed Model 10E Electra. Earhart tried to fly around the world in 1937. Romeo plans to launch a mission this year or next to find out if it is. The first step, he said, is to confirm it. The next step, if possible, would be to raise it to the surface and restore it. So stay tuned. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Next, we'll get an update on the diesel and oil markets from Tom Kloza of the Oil Price Information Service. Ashley Blackford talks with OOIDA Life member Jay Hosty about being named Overdrive's Trucker of the Year, and Scott Thompson finds out what effect the recent cold snap had on spot rates and the freight market from Robert Rouse of DAT. We'll be back in just a moment with more of the program. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off TruckStop Loadboard Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2023 when you purchase Loadboard Pro.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline now, welcome back. It's been a minute since we took stock of the fuel markets and looked to where we may be headed. So let's do that now with the help of Tom Cloza. Tom is the global head of energy analysis for the Oil Price Information Service, and he joins us on the line now. So let's start with diesel prices here. I'm not sure if volatility is the right word here because we're not really seeing big swings like we've seen in recent months. Maybe it's more stability. Since prices seem to be hovering around the 385 mark in recent weeks. You tell me what you see out there, Tom. What's going on with the diesel market right now?
Sure. It's kind of a mixed picture. On the one hand, we have a milder than normal winter after a cold start to it. And so you're not seeing some of the diesel molecules go into winter burns for heating purposes. So that's, tended to send prices down a little bit. But on the other hand, this month in particular, we've started a new movement of drone warfare. And, you tend to sort of get immune to some of the headlines, but a lot of the headlines seem to indicate that Ukraine and also some factions in the Middle East are using drones extensively to really take out petroleum infrastructure. The reason that diesel prices have rallied a little bit here in the spot markets and in the futures markets in the last couple of weeks has to do with drone strikes. There was a strike that hit an export refinery in Russia. There was another one that hit an export terminal for crude. And, it kind of reminds everybody that you can have, some weapons of war that only cost a few $1,000s, and it can really knock out billions of dollars of petroleum infrastructure. So we'll see if it quiets down. Every weekend you tend to hear about some of the headlines, and it's the big difference maker right now. Otherwise, I think we'd be looking at a steady drop in diesel prices.
Interesting. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because obviously we've had the situation in Ukraine now for what? It's been a couple of years. Yeah, it's been a couple of years. Time really does fly. And then obviously we've got the situation in Gaza. And now, as you mentioned, this escalation of violence in the Middle East there. There is, I think, with concern to this latest round of attacks that we've seen, a real concern about a larger conflict bubbling up. That is really kind of the uncertainty factor in all of this, right? That could play a huge role in what we see here in the U.S. In the coming months, right?
Yeah, there's the potential for there to be a conflagration that, people have been talking about 150 different attacks on the U.S. and other allies in the region. And, it can be as small as maybe $1,000 drone to something much more extensive. And we'll have to see what happens with it. We're not familiar with this. And the Ukraine war is going to be two years old very, very shortly. But the twist that it's taken recently is that it appears as though the Ukraine military, along with some other folks who are, against the Russian imperialism, that they're targeting the infrastructure hundreds of miles or hundreds of kilometers away from the Ukraine border. So that's really been the story in January of 2024, that some infrastructure has been knocked out in Russia, and there's potential for more. I mean, they're hitting Vladimir Putin where it hurts him most, which is in his pocketbook.
Yeah, for sure. Let's kind of veer off that topic a little bit and look at some of the other issues that are around right now. In the past, you and I have talked about U.S. refineries for a number of reasons, going offline for this and that. What kind of shape are the U.S. refineries in right now, and how does that factor into everything we're talking about here?
U.S. refineries are in pretty good shape. We did have that cold blast about 2 weeks ago that knocked out about 1.3 million barrels a day of refining capacity, but I don't think it'll be measured in weeks. I think it'll be measured in days. And supplies of diesel across the country are very, very robust. If you're in the mid-continent, the Rockies, the upper Great Plains, or the Great Lakes, there's more diesel than a lot of the suppliers know what to do with it because they don't have access to tidal waters. So we're in a good shape on diesel supply. We'd probably be seeing prices drifting lower if it weren't for these geopolitical premiums that we're seeing now. We're exporting a lot of diesel to Latin America, and now it looks as though Russian exports of their diesel to Brazil and some other places might slide a little bit because of some of the infrastructure damage they've received.
Yeah, and as we look at everything here, I don't have to tell you that this has been an interesting few years. That would be an understatement, I think, and it's been tough for a lot of people for obvious reasons. As we look at fuel prices, diesel prices in the context of the freight market, which has bottomed out, and our listeners, owner-operators in particular, keep looking for some sort of light at the end of this very long tunnel. Diesel prices had been and have been a thorn in their side for a long time now. As you look down the tunnel here, maybe through 2024, as it relates to fuel prices, do you see any light? Do you see some stability here? Obviously, there are a lot of factors that could play in, but it does seem like we're kind of getting to a more stable place, no?
Yeah, I hope we are, and I think we are. And again, if you exempt the geopolitics and some of the machinations that we've seen there, everything points to pretty adequate supply in the United States. Refiners are making an awful lot of money on the diesel that they're bringing to market. I think yesterday, at the U.S. Gulf Coast, it was about $27 a barrel above the price of crude. And, more typical for the first 18 years of this century was probably about $5 or $10 margin. So the margins are very, very robust. And, May tends to be the lowest demand month for diesel, and we won't be seeing those molecules going into heating. Now, we still have the hurdle of perhaps some violent and perhaps very cold February weather. We're not seeing it right now, but Winter Storm Uri back in February of 2021 arrived in the second half of the month, and it really wreaked havoc on U.S. refining capability.
Yeah, always those factors out there. We've been focusing on diesel here for obvious reasons, but gas prices, are they kind of in the same boat here as we look at the big picture?
Yeah, they're doing the cha-cha for most of the year. I think the crude oil and the gasoline markets are going to move higher, and they typically do. I mean, it's typical that you see prices rise as soon as players are reporting for spring training, and then they continue to go up in the early part of the season, and maybe don't start coming down until the Cubs are eliminated every year.
Which is usually in July, right? Right, Tom?
Yeah, it usually happens pretty quickly. So, I think we're going to see, I think gasoline prices, without question, 60 days from now will be considerably higher. I think there's a question mark on whether diesel falters in that period or remains the same, but it's not going to have the same backdrop that gasoline does.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to ask you about because I think we've talked about this before, and there may be people out there that understand the difference here, but there may be people who don't, right? When we look at gas prices, we look at diesel prices, and they don't always move in sync. Can you talk a little bit about the difference there in prices and why we do see one go up and the other go down and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, in the gasoline business, every year is the same. We switch from a winter gasoline that has a lot of cheap ingredients in it to a spring gasoline, and that switch pretty much happens with the April futures contract. And right now, April gasoline, versus today is traded for about 25 cents more. And that 25 cents is because of the additional expense in manufacturing that gasoline. Now, if you combine that with the fact that refinery turnarounds, refinery maintenance tends to be concentrated in March and April, it's a business that essentially has to give itself an enema every year. And enemas can be uncomfortable, as some of us older folks know, but it doesn't mean that the patient is sort of in jeopardy. And every year you tend to see prices go up in the first 4 months of the year, and I think that's going to be the case for gasoline.
When you're talking about high prices, or higher prices, I suppose. Can you put a number on it in terms of diesel, or do you feel comfortable doing that?
Yeah, well, I feel comfortable with gasoline, and I think we've been at about $2.99 for the median price. The average price is about $3.10, so it's higher. But I think that we'll be looking at about 75 cents of price increases for gasoline coming into the spring. And from then on, it'll depend as to whether or not we have the inclement sort of extreme heat that knocks out refineries. On diesel, I think we're probably looking at a $3.75 to $4 world for most of the diesel prices, even a little bit cheaper. One of the interesting things is we've got all this renewable diesel that's being sent to the Pacific Coast, to California, Oregon, and Washington. And it's actually trading for less than the traditional diesel. And it's, being manufactured mostly from soybean oil. And California's probably got more, variation on diesel than the rest of the country combined.
Yeah. You've been at this a while, Tom, and I know you've seen everything change and come back to where it was and so on and so forth. You mentioned the drone attacks earlier. I think that's certainly a new thing here. But when you look at what's going on now, does anything surprise you? Anything jump out to you? Anything that might surprise us as we kind of look ahead here? Obviously, the drone attacks notwithstanding, is there anything else out there that kind of stands out to you?
Well, I would say this year it's a very delicate balance between buyers and sellers of the crude oil and, the overall market. And the drone episodes are new. Mm-hmm. Now, we thought back in 2019 when the Houthis used drones to attack some Saudi installations, we thought that was the beginning of perhaps a much more active world on that front. And it really disappeared until recently. So without that, I think that crude oil is going to be front-end loaded. I think the back half of this year, I would have a tough time believing that the back half will see more expensive prices across the panoply of different hydrocarbons than what we see maybe in the next 100 days or so. A lot of crude oil coming online from the United States, Guyana, Canada, and Brazil, and that's going to have an impact. And the folks in OPEC Plus are going to be wanting to use some of the spare capacity that they've had to rein in the last year.
Yeah, and real quick here, Tom, I've seen some things online about this being, of course, an election year and what effect that may have on all of this. We don't have to get into politics necessarily, but I did want to ask you, that doesn't seem to hold a lot of weight when I look at it. Do you make heads or tails of that conversation?
The only thing I would say is that in an election year, and it's certainly impacting the U.S. response to all of the attacks that are Iranian-based in the Middle East, I think that, there's probably more pressure to react and to take out some Iranian targets outside of that country than there might be otherwise. The other thing I think we'll see is that because it is an election year and it's not appropriate, but the president gets the credit or the blame for expensive or cheap oil prices, I think that if we have issues with hurricanes, this will be an administration that's very quick to grant waivers to use, let's say, a non-clean burning gasoline in Arizona or Nevada or some of the other states. It's really going to be interesting to watch the battleground states because, we can watch the news and think about the election and how it's going to manifest itself. But it's really going to be something that's going to be decided in about 6 or 7 states.
Our thanks to Tom Kloza of the Oil Price Information Service. You can check them out at opisnet.com. We've got a break coming up fast, but stick around. There's more Landline Now right around the corner.
Attention professional drivers, are you behind on your tax filings? You owe money? Integrity Tax Relief Group frees drivers from IRS trouble. You watch the road, we'll keep an eye on the IRS. Call now, 855-976-4291.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a CAT scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget misaccuracy when you're truck on a CAT scale.
Landline Now, welcome back. The winner of Overdrive's Trucker of the Year has been announced, and if you're familiar with OOIDA, it's a name you may recognize. Jay Hosty claimed the title for the 2023 Trucker of the Year. He joins me now. Jay, congratulations. When did you find out about the award?
Well, I was nominated back earlier in the year, and then they narrowed it down from, I think, 10 to 3 people, and they let me know about that. I would guess back in December that I was in the top 3. And after that, it's been a couple weeks now. Todd Dills from Overdrive called me and let me know that I won. It's been a couple weeks.
How did that feel to find out that you won?
Oh, well, I was honored. I was honored just to be in it at all. And it felt pretty good. Of the people that were in it, and any one of us could have won. It had to be really hard to pick somebody out, from the group.
What does it mean to you to get this title of Trucker of the Year?
I don't feel any more special than any other truck driver out here. We're all just doing our jobs and, doing what we do, what we enjoy doing for the most part. And so it's a humbling thing, but like I said, I'm just out here doing what I've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
To make a living.
Can you kind of walk me through your history in trucking? When did you get started?
I got started in 1981 at the young age of 19 years old.
Wow.
I bought my first truck really not having a clue what I was doing. I give all the glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, because without him, I couldn't have done anything the way I've done it. He has definitely led me through a long and safe and prosperous career, but I started out at 19 years old, really not having a clue. Never had any family members in the trucking business or anything like that. It was just something that I felt I wanted to do, and kind of stumbled on this first truck that I bought. My wife actually was the one that seen it and pointed it out to me, and that's kind of how it all started. Right from me buying a truck. It really wasn't like I was planning on buying a truck at that young age, but it just kind of happened that way.
And throughout the years, can you walk me through your career and sort of the ups and downs, and how did everything kind of work out?
I started out with this first, I call it a little truck because it was just a single axle, gasoline engine, day cab tractor. And all I did was move containers, empty containers, basically around in New Orleans from the ports. It started from that, and went from one truck, upgraded to the next one, which was more like a tractor, more of a common semi truck. It was a tandem axle. It had a diesel engine, 1970 model Freightliner, and we're able to pull, loaded containers with that tractor. But I still didn't really go out of town with it. I was just pretty much local, and went from that and upgraded to a cab over international and started going out of town a little more. Well, by the time I was 25, I bought my first brand new truck, and I didn't think I was going to get in a brand new truck. I was just looking to upgrade from my cab over a 78 International that I had. I was just looking to upgrade, and when I went to the dealership, they showed me this new truck, and I didn't think I had a shot at getting a brand new truck, between the financing and everything, and it ended up working out that I got in that brand new 1987 International 9300 model. It was a conventional, my first real conventional, and that was at 25 years old, and I paid that truck off in under 5 years pulling containers.
Wow.
At 72 cents a mile, which the older fellas told me that I was not going to be able to pay for that truck pulling containers, but I did.
Wow, proved them wrong.
Yep, absolutely. I was at 25 years old, I was like the young kid around there because all these guys were old enough to be my dad, most of them, and they didn't. They all ran, used trucks. Nobody had a brand new truck, so they thought I was crazy to do that. I had a $1,400 a month payment in 1987. From what I can, looking back, I don't think I ever really struggled. I mean, I really had an eye on my cost. I understood cost per mile, and I really looked at that and followed that, and also being just a naturally frugal person that I am. So it's wasn't hard to really save money. I mean, if there was money left over, I wasn't out spending it. I knew I needed to save my money wherever I could, and I've always been that way.
What is it about trucking that just brings such a passion for you?
Well, big part is freedom. You don't really have somebody looking over your shoulder per se. That's the biggest part. Traveling around, I enjoy seeing different places and going different places. But the freedom is the biggest thing. The money, we make decent money as an owner operator, but we don't really make nearly as much as I think most people think we make. When you subtract all your expenses and your net profit, I don't think it's nearly what a lot of people probably figure that we make. So I can't say that, it's all about the money, because it's more about, I guess, just owning your own truck and, doing your own thing is a little different than driving for someone and, having to go wherever you're told to go and pick the load up here and pick the load up there. Where owner-operator, you just got so much more freedom to do what you want. Take off when you want. You don't really have to report to anyone or check in with anyone. Can I have some time off? I just want to take time off. I'm off.
Now, you've been an OOIDA member since 1989, and you were on the board from 2004 until 2010. Looking back on those 35 years, what made you join OOIDA?
Well, I think, if I remember right, probably seeing Landline Now in different, the magazine in different places is probably how I first heard about OOIDA. And I always figured, they were really the only thing going on that was looking out for the driver. And I just figured I was going to be in this for a long time, so I wanted to join, an organization that was actually looking out for drivers. I'm a life member.
Then in 94, you getting on the board, what prompted you to do that?
Well, Todd Spencer, actually. I think I used to call in and ask questions and talk about, give different comments on things that were going on in the industry. And I'd have questions for people at OOIDA. And Todd Spencer had asked me just kind of out of the blue if I would be interested in being on the board of directors. And that's really how that went. And I was shocked that they would ask me. And when I got there, I kind of figured they're probably not going to want me as a board of directors. All these fellows are so much older and have much more experience than I had. But I guess they seen something in me, because I did get picked to be on the board. And that was a very big honor to serve on the directors of OOIDA. Very big honor.
What advice would you have for owner-operators?
It's about knowing your cost. It's about understanding your costs, knowing them and understanding how it works, and knowing, what freight works for you. Just because somebody else can say, oh, well, that's cheap freight, I wouldn't haul that. Well, knowing that in your situation, that might not be the same. That cheap freight is a different term for each individual, because it just depends on, how your business is. If you have truck payments, if you don't have truck payments, just so many different factors. So for me, the biggest advice is for a young owner operator is just knowing your cost per mile, and also you just got to kind of have the instinct to save your money. Not when you make a good week, just spend it because it's there. Better to save the money. So times when it's slow and it's not that things are down, you have your money in the bank to help make payments or whatever you have going on.
Now, you've been driving for many years. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen over the years?
Well, I guess the biggest one, and it's a negative, is the distracted driving, people on phones. That's a big problem. I think that causes a lot of accidents. It's just people not paying attention. Everybody, I guess, maybe it's from ELDs. I run an ELD. I don't really have a problem with it, but I think so many drivers are in a bigger hurry now because they're racing that clock all the time. And I understand it. In some situations, I get it. I try not to get caught up in that. I'm actually a slower driver. I say I drive fewer mileage rather than trying to get somewhere in a hurry. I take it slow, and it works for me. But I understand, some drivers have to be in a hurry and in a rush, but that ELD just makes them be that much more in trying to, beat that clock, basically.
Any positive changes over the years that you've seen? I know there are a lot. When I talk to, drivers that have been on the road for many years, there are a lot of things kind of negatively that's changed, but anything positive?
Well, that's kind of hard because it seems, electronics and communicate, the cell phone in general is a positive thing, a good thing, because, of course, I was driving when we had to stop at a payphone, at a rest area, at a payphone, make a phone call, to get directions. So electronics has its good side. It's just, the part about being distracted is not a good thing.
Yeah.
GPS, I think that's a great advancement to have a GPS because, you used to have to call somebody and get directions, and some people just shouldn't be giving you directions, and you get on the phone and they're trying to tell you how to get there, and it's just some people can give good directions and it's easy, but having a GPS to me is one of the biggest positives I can think of that makes my job easier, let's say, having that technology that can bring you right to where you need to go. I think they're great.
Now, I saw a quote. You said, you can give me $1 million, but I'm still going to drive because I like it. It's not about the money. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Well, that's just basically how I've always felt. I felt like I have a friend that always plays the lottery, and he would always say, if I win millions, I'm going to take care of y'all. Or he'd say something like, and you won't have to drive your truck anymore. And I say, well, no, you could give me $1 million. I like driving my truck, so I'll still drive it. So yes, it does pay the bills. I make a living with it. But when you enjoy what you're doing, it's not, I don't consider it work. I really enjoy it, that I feel like I would still drive even if I didn't have to.
Right. Anything else you'd like to add that I may have missed?
Well, I got to give credit to my wife. We've been married. We got married the same year I bought that first truck, 1981. So we're 42 years married.
Wow.
And she's, it's a lonely life when you're married to a truck driver because he's gone so much. So she's put up with that and not really liked the lifestyle. She's not a wife that says, I'm glad he's gone. She's more glad when I'm home and happy that I'm home. So she's as the old song says, she's the woman behind the man behind the wheel.
Well, that speaks well for your character if she does want you home.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder, and then she's often said, well, she doesn't say it as much anymore, but in the early days, she would say, I wish you had just a 9-to-5 job where you came home every night. And I've always said, well, if I did have that, we might not still be married. Who knows?
That's true, yeah. That was Jay Hosty talking about his career and being named Overdrive's Trucker of the Year. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more after this.
Stock up on Howe's Diesel Treat, the nation's most trusted anti-gel. And to be safe from the harshest winter conditions, make sure you have Howe's Diesel Lifeline on hand, the fastest-acting gelling rescue product. Available nationwide, Howe's products are designed to keep you rolling through the toughest conditions. Visit Howe'sProducts.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now, welcome back. Time now for our weekly check on the spot market, courtesy of our friends at DAT, and more specifically today, our friend Robert Rouse. Robert, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Scott. Thanks for asking.
Thanks for being on the show, as always. We're going to get right to it here. I'm looking at some of the numbers from last week, Robert, and I'll just say it here. They don't look too promising.
Yeah, I mean, overall, the spot market is still pretty soft. Last week we saw a little bit of a bump, but that seems to just be for the weather. Nationally, we saw the number of loads decrease by about 7% to around 1.13 million loads on the DAT load board. While we are down from last year's numbers for this time of year, we did see similar load volumes in both 2017 and 2019. In both of those years, we saw a slight increase in freight volume over the next 2 weeks. This is largely due to two major events in the United States that really drive consumer spending. One, most truckers might know, is the Super Bowl is coming up, and the other is Valentine's Day. Both of those are huge consumer holidays, which drive a lot of spending, which means there's a lot of goods that need to get to market. And so that's going to drive a lot of on-demand goods over the next couple of weeks. When we look at the number of trucks on the DAT load board, they came in right around 307,000 trucks last week. We still see a fairly consistent number of trucks in the market week to week. They go up and down just a little bit, but it's been fairly consistent over the last couple of months. When we look at the overall strength of the spot market last week, looking at load to truck ratios, they did decrease for vans and reefer equipment types, while flatbeds remained relatively flat for a second week in a row. If we look at, just dry van freight specifically, freight volumes returned to a more normal level last week following the prior week's impact from the extreme cold. So spot market load post volumes decreased by about 5% week over week, and it's within 17% of last year's volumes. While carrier-specific equipment posts were completely flat, this resulted in last week's dry van loaded truck ratio decreasing by about 5% to 2.7. The key trend to look at is that last week's movement in the market indicators was highly driven by that cold weather across the country. So we're still seeing it when the year will actually start kicking off in a big way. And lastly, talking about rates, last week we saw national benchmark broker to carrier spot rates without fuel increased for flatbed equipment types, while vans stayed flat and reefers decreased. Although the national average reefer spot rate dropped by about 3 cents per mile to $2.58 per mile last week, there were pockets in the reefer market where trucks were still in pretty high demand. According to the USDA data on truck availability, there was a slight shortage of trucks in the Pacific Northwest for loads of onions, potatoes, and winter vegetables in 4 of the 6 produce regions in California following last week's heavy rain. Over the next week, we expect that for reefer rates to remain kind of at this level with a few strong markets for rates. Lastly, dry van line haul rates were flat last week, and they were remaining around the national average, about $2.17 per mile. Compared to last year, line haul rates were about 5 cents per mile lower, but based on the volume of loads moved on DAT's top 50 lanes, all of those averaged about $2.46 per mile last week, and that's about 29 cents per mile higher than the national average.
You mentioned the reefer rate there dropping by about 3 cents per mile. Can we just kind of run through the different equipment types here a little more in depth? Van, flatbed, how are they looking? Or I guess, how were they looking last week?
Yeah, so when we look directly at van rates, they were right around $2.17 per mile. Those wasn't really a change. The only change that we saw was a little bit fuel decreased a little bit. Reefer rates went down, and that was mostly because last week we saw a lot of reefer rates that were a little bit higher or inflated because more freight was moving to reefers because there was the protect from freeze. So there was a lot more capacity that was needed on the reefers, which drove the rate up a little bit higher than we normally might see. So they're back down to a normal rate, about $2.58 per mile. And then flatbeds were up about 2 cents per mile. They're running around $2.54 per mile. And that's relatively what we would expect to see for this time of year for flatbeds.
Yeah, so not a whole lot by way of big changes there as we look at kind of the entire picture here. We always are looking for light on the horizon, markets that are performing better than others to maybe steer owner-operators toward. Are there any markets right now that kind of stand out to you as maybe being one that people should keep an eye on?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot going on in the industries out there. One trend that we have seen is how factory growth has boosted truckload demand in Columbus, Ohio. The Columbus freight market, it's the largest of 4 in Ohio, is poised to become even larger one for truckload carriers following a series of major construction projects. According to the U.S. Commerce Department officials, Intel's decision to build 2 factories near Columbus is becoming one of 2 semiconductor manufacturing clusters being developed as part of the Federal CHIPS Act. President Biden picked Columbus as one of the 5 workforce hubs in May to fully capitalize on federal investments in semiconductors, clean energy, and electric vehicles. And really, geography plays a pretty significant role in the emerging dominance of the Columbus market. It's located along Interstates I-70 and I-71 on the eastern side of the Midwest region. And there's 4 key freight regions totaling 140 million people can be reached within a day's truck drive. The largest in the Midwest, Eastern Canada, Northeastern United States, and the Mid-Atlantic region. The region is also home to intermodal facilities operated by CSX and Norfolk Southern. Currently, it's ranked the 12th largest spot market in the DAT freight network. Columbus accounts for 2% of all of the total weekly volume. Might not seem like a lot, but when you're looking at the entire nation, it's actually a pretty big percentage. It's also a balanced freight market with roughly the same number of loads entering and leaving daily. And top outbound destinations include places like Chicago, Joliet, Atlanta, Allentown, and Elizabeth, New Jersey.
All right. Good advice there. Columbus, Ohio. Circle that one on your maps out there. Robert, any other tips for our listeners here, owner-operators in particular, as you're kind of looking at the landscape out there?
Yeah. One thing that is super crucial is getting enough sleep. It's pretty widely accepted that sleep is crucial to being alert and rested. That said, there's some new studies out there that are actually coming with napping has becoming more recognized for its value. The trick is really knowing when to nap is pretty crucial, and also how long to nap. Nap duration is best in 20 to 30 minutes or an hour and a half blocks. You don't want to go kind of in the middle or longer. But more on longer naps we'll talk about next week in our DAT blog. Shorter power naps in the afternoon can boost alertness and vigilance, which are critical to long-distance trucking. Assuming the post-lunch siesta occurs roughly 8 hours after waking, most will be tired around 2:30 p.m. each afternoon. So logic would suggest that that's the right time to take a nap. In reality, the window of opportunity for mid-afternoon naps is pretty short, and most find that it can by the time that they find a place to pull over and put their heads down, they're no longer tired and can't fall asleep. So knowing when you get tired each afternoon and pulling over before that post-lunch dip in alertness hits is pretty critical. The math is pretty simple. Note when you expect to get tired each afternoon by adding 8 hours to when you typically wake up, and then track when that happened, and you'll arrive at something pretty surprising. You'll get tired roughly at the same time every day. Mine is like clockwork at 2:34 Eastern each day. And that's when you need to have your head on a pillow ready, not waiting for the tiredness to appear before pulling over. So if you try it, set your alarm for 30 minutes to ensure you don't oversleep and get that really good nap in.
Robert, you're speaking my language when you're talking naps, so you got my attention there. We'll have to leave it there for now. As you mentioned there, the DAT blog is a great place to get more information, and we'll talk to you again next week, Robert. Thanks again.
Sounds great.
That was Robert Rouse of DAT closing out our show for today. Thanks for listening, and please do join us again. We've got another one right around the corner. So until then, take care out there and drive safe.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
Chrome, and I am
a
professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us.
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.